Good morning and welcome once again to West Valley Unitarian Universalist Church's Sunday morning Zoom service. My name is Ann Harper. I am worship associate for today's Sunday service. It is always so heartening to realize that our efforts to meet and interact virtually during this COVID challenge are rewarded by the presence of so many smiling faces on these Sunday mornings. Once again, I am sensing that spirit of hope and anticipation as we move forward together. If you are a newcomer or are thinking about adding West Valley UU Church to your weekly to-do list, know that you are welcome here regardless of your level of education, your financial status, your ethnicity, your gender identity, or your religious heritage. Unitarian Universalism is a way of seeing ourselves, others, and our world as whole and beautiful in our very being. Such respect goes beyond tolerance and even acceptance to a deep appreciation of the uniqueness of every person, place, and thing, and for the diversity that this uniqueness brings. Such a way of seeing asks for a mindfulness that may seem hard to muster in the midst of busy, stressful lives. So it takes practice. And this practice begins at home. It begins with our everyday life. And Unitarian Universalism is a way of living together, a way of being and acting in the world that helps us to create freedom, justice, equality, and a sense of care and connectedness for all. Such a call seems huge and abstract. Each of us answers this call through the choices and actions, large and small, of our everyday life, at home, at work, at church, and in the communities to which we belong. These words are excerpted from the UUA publication, Let's Talk About Respect. I have not received a notice of any announcements to be made this morning. Barry, did anyone contact you? Okay,
No.
so we'll move on. We begin our service each week with the lighting of our handsome and inspiring chalice. Paul, if you will do the honors, I will offer these words of the candle lighting prayer from our Jewish friends currently celebrating these days of Passover. Blessed are you, our God, ruler of the world, who sanctifies us with the mitzvah and calls upon us to kindle the lights of Passover. As Unitarian Universalists, we have not bound ourselves to a creed or to dogma. Rather, we enter into a covenant with each other, agreeing to do our best to live by the principles listed therein. Again, Paul, if you would please project the covenant on our monitors so that we may read together. Love is the doctrine of our congregation. The quest for truth is our holy right, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in friendship. Thus do we covenant. Sorry for the hesitation here. Every time there's a change of format, I blip out and have to get back in. I'm sure you can hear me, but I'm not sure you can see me. So there we go. Our church is so much more than a building. It is a community of people looking forward to the day not too long in the future when we can once again hug and break bread together and sing together in our sanctuary. Till then, patience is still our byword. Meanwhile, the patio and the sanctuary, the RE building and our fellowship space and the grounds still need to be maintained. There's the mortgage, city services and power, the needs for which have not changed. Each week, we take up an offering to help sustain our buildings and campus. During the following offertory music, you could use this quiet time to write your supporting check, which can be mailed to the church, or as some do, consider a scheduled auto pay arrangement with your bank. Currently, there's the opportunity, if you don't need all of that check that you got from our government, to give some of it to West Valley. I'm sure those who handle our finances would be delighted to receive it. Thank you, Kelly and Rocky, I think. I didn't get that name on my list, but I never know when Kelly is listed as a musician what she's going to play, the piano, her flute, a violin, or a guitar. So it's always a lovely surprise. Our theme for the month of March has been respect. Today, we welcome back our treasured part-time minister, Reverend Cathy Corbin Menino. When Reverend Cathy graced our pulpit earlier this month, she spoke of respect with the focus on self-respect. Today, she will be guiding us through the territory of respect, gift or reward. Cathy?
Thank you, Anne, and the musicians and Paul. It's good to be with you today. I've heard it said that respect should not be given indiscriminately. It must be earned. I've also been taught that respect is an inherent right that should be given to everyone until they show you otherwise. Author Mildred Taylor's character in Roll of Thunder, Hear Me Cry says, you have to demand respect in this world. Ain't nobody just gonna hand it to you. There are things you can't back down on, things you gotta take a stand on. But it's up to you to decide what them things are. How you carry yourself, what you stand for, that's how you gain respect. But little one, ain't nobody's respect worth more than your own. I spoke about self-respect last time. Lebanese American activist Ziad Abdelnaour tells us that trust is earned, respect is given, and loyalty is demonstrated. Betrayal of any one of those is to lose all three. I personally believe that we owe everyone a basic level of respect, just for being a fellow human being. But the level of respect varies from person to person depending upon their own self-respect and my view of them. Philosopher Adam Smith believed that respect is one of humanity's most noble sentiments. The highest levels of respect are always earned, never just handed to you. Before granting the highest level of respect for others, we make sure the person deserves that honor. We should be kind and polite to everyone. No question about that, which is basic respect. But utmost respect is earned. And there is nothing wrong with affording some people greater respect than others for obvious reasons. Their actions simply warrant more respect than others. For example, I think we would all agree that an honest person who consistently does good things for other people deserves more respect than a habitual liar who bullies and cheats. Our UU principles move from acceptance of one another in the third principle to respect in the seventh principle. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which each of us individually are a part. To have respect for life itself, for all existence, recognizes a relationship, a covenant, a connection. It's a circle. We move from the seventh principle back to the beginning with the first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. It's also a circle in that respect given produces respect received. UU Minister Reverend Barbara Merritt writes that the web of existence in which we live, move, and have our being often includes violent struggles for domination and survival, as well as breathtaking sunsets and the smile of a newborn baby. This web of existence is good and evil, comforting and terrible, a web of life and a web of death. The seventh principle asks us to have a clear and affirming relationship with what is real. We must learn the spiritual discipline of respectfully entering into relationship with many conditions and challenges of this world. One of the best ways we show respect for someone in any relationship is to truly listen to their point of view. Bono says, to be one, to be united is a great thing, but to respect the right to be different is maybe even greater. Voltaire wrote, I may disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Obviously, we will not always agree with one another on every topic, but I think we can agree with Voltaire and Bono that we should allow each other to have and express our own ideas and views, regardless of whether or not they are met with agreement. James Calvin Davis, theologian and professor of liberal arts and religion at Middlebury College, in his essay, Respect Though Differences Divide Us, defines civility as an exercise in patience, integrity, humility, and mutual respect in civil conversations, even, or especially, with those with whom we disagree. Looking at those individual qualities, it was a good idea to start with patience, because patience is a key component of the virtue of civility. It pushes us to relate to our ideological opponent as a partner in conversation, not simply as an obstacle for getting what we want. Patience insists that we listen. The second quality, integrity, is the commitment to representing our own positions and those of our opponents truthfully. It requires that we remain consistent and honest in our reasons for advocating our positions, and it also prohibits the mischaracterization of our opponent's view. Even some of my favorite political pundits won't always repeat accurately what the speaker they don't agree with has said. I talk to the TV all the time, saying, that's not what he or she said. Get it right, or you will lose the integrity of your message. I agree with you, but please correctly report what he or she has said. The third, humility. Humility means that we enter every public conversation open to the possibility that we could change our minds. Humility keeps us open to the opportunity that our beliefs may be refined by what we encounter in our conversations. When we take the time to listen patiently to and learn from one another, we are in a greater position to exercise mutual respect for one another. Civility requires that we extend the courtesy of respect. And that means respecting each other's right to present moral world views in public. Civility requires that even if I think you are tragically mistaken, I will honor your right to participate in the American enterprise of public moral conversation. And there's a lot of that going on with social media. Os Guinness puts it this way: what we are looking for in civility is not so much truths that can unite us, but the terms on which we can negotiate and by which we can live with the differences that divide us. There's a Buddy Guy song entitled Skin Deep. The lyrics are, I've been around a while, I know wrong from right, and since a long time ago, things always been black and white. Just like you can't judge a book by the cover, we all got to be careful how we treat one another. Skin deep, underneath we're all the same. Skin deep, underneath we're all the same. I want to share a story from our UU history about building respect. When Joseph Jordan was born in Virginia in 1842, slavery was still legal. Most people of African descent were treated as property, like horses or dogs. They were bought and sold. They had no rights. Whether enslaved or free, people of color were not treated with respect. Joseph had been born free in a small community on the Elizabeth River. He learned to read and write. When he was 21, he moved to the city of Norfolk and found work, first as a laborer, then as a grocer, and finally as a carpenter. He built furniture and houses with his hands. He married Indiana Brown, and they had 3 children and built a new life together. The Civil War had ended by now, slavery was gone, and many other people also needed to build new lives. Joseph worked hard. He bought land and built more houses, which he rented to other families. But even though people could no longer be bought and sold, true freedom had not yet arrived for African Americans. The laws were unfair, and it was hard for them to find places to live, or good jobs, or schools of any kind. Joseph had become a Baptist minister, and when he preached on Sundays, he sometimes spoke of the sins of the white oppressors and how God would surely punish them by sending them to burn in hell for all eternity. Then a friend gave Joseph a book, The Plain Guide to Universalism, and in it he read God's promise of salvation to all, the powerless and the powerful, the oppressed and their oppressors. Universalism said that everyone, no matter who they were or what they had done, was a child of God. So Joseph stopped preaching a message of vengeance, and he began preaching a message of respect and love. Joseph wanted to learn more about the Universalist faith, so he went to Philadelphia to study with a Universalist minister. The people in that church treated him as a person instead of a thing, as a fellow child of God, as someone worthy of respect. The 7 members of the Universalist Ordaining Council found him to have a clear and bright mind and recommended him unanimously. On the 31st of March, 1889, Joseph Jordan officially became a Universalist minister, the first African American to be ordained by the Universalist denomination. Joseph returned to Norfolk, Virginia, and opened the first Universalist Church of Norfolk in a rented room. He built the pulpit with his own hands. The congregation grew quickly, and with the help of donations from other Universalist churches, the Universalists in Virginia soon built new meeting houses and schools. Dozens of African American children came to learn, for there were few other schools available to them. Joseph knew that education was vital. He worked every day, taught during the week, and preached on Sundays, sharing the Universalist message of God's love for everyone. Joseph Jordan died in 1901 when he was 59 years old. Over many decades, the churches and schools Joseph Jordan helped build gave thousands of families in Virginia a chance to learn and a place to be treated with respect. American theologian Jim Wallis writes in Overcoming the Cycles of Disrespect that when it comes to equality and diversity, racism and sexism, He believes the underlying issue and the most deeply felt pain revolves around one word: respect. Respect is the thing we all want and need, and it is what is denied to people over and over again because of race, gender, and class. So many of the demands of protests, so much of the aggrieved voice in response to racism, and even the angry counterattack, is deep down a cry for respect. Within each of us is that desperate cry. There is a real person in here. The cycle of disrespect works like this. The disrespect begins with an obvious injustice, as massive an offense as racial or sexual slavery, or the more subtle yet cruel forms of racial or gender discrimination. The pain of disrespect is felt and it hurts. Then the response begins. Disrespect breeds more disrespect, which is used to confirm the disrespect in the first place, which further increases the resentment and anger of the disrespected, and so on and so forth. There is only one solution to the cycle of disrespect, and that is ultimate respect. Ultimate respect is an act of principle and an act of faith. Respect for other people is not something they should be forced to earn, or to beg for, or fight for. It is owed to them by virtue of their very humanity. We get respect when we give respect. Breaking the cycle requires the reassertion of our absolute equality. But how do we show respect to those who show no respect? How can I respect the opinions and beliefs of those with whom I strongly disagree? How in these times of extreme polarization do we answer those questions and show the core of who we are? A people who care about religious principles. I have a hard time respecting beliefs that are morally indefensible, irrational, and dangerous. I have real difficulty in respecting many religious beliefs that others hold deeply. So the best I can do is to refrain from deliberately taunting of what others hold dear. Not all ideas should be respected. People's cruelty and other bad actions should definitely not be respected. But the people who hold those ideas, that's another matter. We cannot affirm and promote inherent worth and dignity without respecting their core humanity. We can respect people at their core. We can give due regard to others' feelings, rights, and wishes, even when we disagree. But we are not bound to admire everyone. And we are also not bound to simply tolerate either. The late UU minister Forrest Church, in his sermon, "Is Tolerance a Virtue?" asked that question because literally to tolerate means to abide with repugnance. When I read that, I thought, wow, that's a great description of what I do with some of my strongly conservative family members. I abide their beliefs with repugnance. Repugnance means disgust, abhorrence, and revulsion. But I felt a little better about myself when I read his next words. Tolerance can be a virtue if we're talking about our grade on politics or an occasional and therefore not particularly important lapse in our children's table manners. It can also be a virtue when we choose not to condemn, only to disapprove of one another's foibles. Without a degree of tolerance, we would all become intolerable, rife with judgment, incapable of forgiveness, driven by a dangerous and often self-delusional sense of superiority. Even at its best, though, tolerance remains a relatively weak virtue. And at its worst, tolerance is a vice. And this can happen in two ways, he said. First, tolerance can become a self-congratulatory cover for condescension. For instance, if we merely tolerate another's religion or sexual preference, we tend to fall short of the higher call to mutual respect. If I tolerate you, I am putting up with you. I am looking down at you while acting in a high-minded manner. This is an invitation less to righteousness than to self-righteousness. He said we must check ourselves when we are tempted only to tolerate those who are different from us, rather than working harder to understand and respect them. He proposed that you upgrade the condescending virtue of tolerance to a true respect. However, he goes on to say that if to tolerate means to abide with repugnance, well, there are some things too repugnant to abide. There are some things and some people's actions that we should never tolerate. It may be tempting to reduce people to their beliefs, but I need to remember that we are all more than the sum of what we believe. We can be aware that there are areas of agreement and differences, but concern for another's well-being should never vacillate. Freelance journalist Sarah DiGiulio wrote that she finds real value in having conversations with people with whom she doesn't see eye to eye, because it's just possible that her perspective on a topic might actually evolve. She might learn something new. She says that it strengthens your own perspective to know more clearly why your views stand up to contradictory ones. But that takes building respect with and for one another. I came across a lecture by Holly Weeks, who teaches communication at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, who suggested ways to disagree with grace. Step 1. Decide if the conversation is worth having. Do you really want to go there? Do you want to learn why someone feels or believes the way they do, or do you want to change their mind? She says, I don't have to have a conversation with someone I disagree with to know something about their perspective. I can read about it or find someone who knows about it. If you're trying to change that person's mind, the goal of that conversation is not learning and understanding. It's a lecture. It's okay to tell someone, I really don't want to have this conversation. I'm going to choose to opt out. Second, if you're the one really interested in taking on a challenging topic, ask first if you can ask about it. But then be sure and perk up your ears to any emotional intensity or hesitation or guardedness. If so, you may be entering volatile territory. For me, when I see that a conversation is spiraling downwards, I have stopped and said, I'm uncomfortable where this path is heading, so I'm going to back off. 3, keep it neutral. If you're asking questions about the other person's perspective, ask in a way that doesn't come off as if you already have the correct perspective or answer. Instead, try this, she said. I know conservatives have strong opinions about such and such an issue, but I'm not as familiar as to the why. Perhaps you can enlighten me. 4, start off the conversation with understanding. Legitimately acknowledge their right to their point of view. Agree with some part of what the other person is saying, acknowledging their point of view, and then add something in response. Step 5 is connected somewhat to step 4. Look for where you agree. The goal of productive conversations is to build understanding and learning for all parties, not to tear one another apart. It's not about who wins and who loses. The constructive approach is to be curious and seek to understand. You do this by finding areas of agreement rather than disagreement. 6, talk less. Give the other person space to respond. Remember, it's a dialogue. Dialogue means you are both responding to one another, point after point, which is different from a diatribe, where one side of the conversation drones out all others. And it's different from a debate, which is an attempt to prove one side wrong and one side right. 7, avoid using the word but. The word but is a subtraction sign in conversation. It erases what was just said. When I was in chaplaincy training, my supervisor crossed out the word but every time I used it in my writing and stopped me every time I used it in my speaking. If you hear yourself saying, yes, but, it's a pretty good indication you are trying to score a point rather than keeping the dialogue constructive. 8. Resist the current vogue to be provocative. I was talking to our own Lori Allen, a journalist major, who said she has become so disappointed at the direction news coverage has taken from reporting the news to making the news. It has turned provocative. We need to take the opportunity when we can to neutralize and disarm the emotional load in our conversations. And that often comes down to word choice and the tone of our voice. That's a lot to remember, and it takes practice. Mr. Rogers said, "It's very dramatic when two people come together to work something out. It's easy to take a gun and annihilate your opposition. But what is really exciting to me is to see people with differing views come together and finally respect each other." May it be so in all that we say and do. Namaste.
Thank you once again, Cathy. And I think we can all agree that you have our ultimate respect. We conclude today's service with a unison reading of the West Valley's mission statement, after which we will extinguish the chalice and the postlude will be played. We agree to provide a safe place to celebrate diversity, draw inspiration for living better lives, foster social and environmental justice, and compassionately support each other in our spiritual searches. Trying to get back on screen again. There I am. For closing words today, I have borrowed from our gray hymnal, reading number 686. Go in peace, live simply, gently, at home in yourselves. Act justly, speak justly. Remember the depth of your own compassion. Forget not your power in the days of your powerlessness. Do not desire to be wealthier than your peers, and stint not your hand of charity. Practice forbearance. Speak the truth or speak not. Take care of yourselves as bodies, for you are a good gift. Crave peace for all people in the world, beginning with yourselves. And go as you go with the dream of that peace alive in your heart. As we extinguish our chalice, bringing today's service to a close, I offer these words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Before moving on to the postlude music, let us all join in thanking those whose dedication, capabilities, and generosity have made this service possible. Paul and Barry as co-hosts, Jan, our office manager, for keeping us informed, Paul for his selections of just the right music, and for recording our musicians, Jeanette, Lily, Kelly, and Larry, and of course, Rev Cathy, not as a musician, but maybe. There will be a brief pause following the postlude while Paul adjusts the muting settings.